God created the universe, God created the earth, God created human beings, and God goes on creating every one of us. And God created every human being with this fundamental dignity, this value that we get from God. And God also created a social order. There's God, and there's children of God. Everyone with equal worth and dignity. And human beings did that pretty well for a while. And then civilization happened. I remember when I was in school, they said civilization was the division of labor, where different people did different things. I recently read in A People's History of the World by Chris Harmon, he describes civilization as the division of wealth. He said with agriculture came for the first time enough food for everybody, plus some. There was a surplus. And at first people shared the surplus. But over time, some people started taking that surplus. And over time they took more. Conquest accelerated this. One people would conquer another, and the conquerors would take that surplus, and the conquered would not. And we have this development of the haves and the have-nots. And this continued until we got all the way to the place where people thought human beings could own other human beings. It was the opposite of what God created. That's what was happening with the Israelites. The Egyptians owned those people. They were slaves. And in our first reading, we hear about God entering history and delivering them from slavery. That pinnacle moment when God passed over the land of Egypt and freed the slaves, freed the Israelites from slavery. And God freed them from slavery and took them across the Red Sea and took them into the wilderness, and God gave them the 10 Commandments, the last two of which are, thou shalt not covet. There will be no surplus taking among you. And the Israelites lived it. They lived it for quite a while. They had an egalitarian society. And then eventually, we see the development of haves and have-nots, and the Israelites want a king, and now the king is, taking, and we have this uneven society, the haves and have-nots, until pretty soon Israel looked like everybody else, all the way until we had people owning other people. And that is the world that Jesus came into. That is the world that God incarnated into. In Jesus' time, the highest value was hospitality. And it was a dusty world, and so washing the feet when you entered a person's house was an important part of hospitality. But the host didn't do it. The slave did it. It was beneath the host. The slave did it. And so it is meaningful that our reading on the eve of Jesus being arrested and being tried and convicted and executed, on the eve of that day, Jesus takes the place of a slave. He takes the place of a slave. God has a long history of solidarity with the pain of the poor, of solidarity with the people that other people say aren't worth much. And so Jesus is taking this place of a slave and washing the feet. Peter wasn't there yet. Peter was thinking Jesus would be the kind of king like he was used to, that king who was a surplus taker. But that is not the kind of king that Jesus was. And as Jesus gets to Peter, Peter says, "You can't wash me. Jesus, you're embarrassing yourself. What are you doing?" And then Jesus teaches him, "Unless I wash you, you have no part of me." And Peter's quick switch sounds a lot less like understanding and a lot more like, "Oh, I get it, we're pretending. You're just pretending to be a slave." But in the next 24 hours, Jesus will teach Peter that there was no pretending happening. As Jesus the Christ, the Holy One of God, will be in solidarity with every other victim. And as Jesus is walking this pathway to crucifixion, he will do it in an extraordinary way, where there will be no lording over, there will be no dominating. Ironically, God, children of God, here we have the one who actually has authority to lord it over. But he will not lord it over people. He will not dominate. There will be no force. Our Lord will take the place of a slave. Living in God's kingdom means living by God's social order. God, children of God. Every child of God with that deep, valuable dignity given them by God. And Jesus says that's how people will know us. That's how people will know that we are his followers, that we love like he did, that we are in solidarity with the least, with the ones that the world says don't matter. That surplus taking is still happening today. I just ran across a statistic the other day from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that productivity in the last 40 years in this country has gone up 80%. But wages to the people who produce that have gone up just over 10. Someone's taking the surplus. In Jesus' time, the people who didn't matter were slaves. So who are the people today that the world says don't matter? Maybe it's small farmers in Central America growing chocolate and coffee. And so we sell equal exchange here to support their business. Or maybe it's people who can't afford housing, and so we have Trinity New Hope to give them hope. Or maybe it's people who don't have fresh vegetables in their life. Ironically, the most expensive food that we have. And so we have the garden. Or perhaps it is people caught in the horror of war. And this congregation knows a thing or two about welcoming refugees. We belong. Our Christian place is with the people that the world says don't matter. That's our Christian place. Doing as Jesus did, standing in solidarity with the pain of the poor and following that new commandment to love one another. That's living in God's kingdom. It's a kingdom where there is God and the children of God. And it was a kingdom that Jesus was so committed to, he would be crucified for it.